Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Perspective. And I'm smiling from ear to ear, and you'll also see in the clothes that I'm wearing is really expressing my delight for the beginning of spring. Alhamdulillah. May the season bless us with everything that's good. May we get fruitful rains and go ahead in a beautiful summer as well. Now, it is almost the end of the year. September marks the beginning of year end, the beginning of spring, the beginning of lots and lots of promise, alhamdulillah. But I think it's also that time of year when parents apply their minds to the beginning of the school year, and that, of course, is mid-January. Back in the day when I was at school, I just hated it when we had the school holidays and parents reminded us that you have 10 days left or however many days left to go back to school. And I didn't enjoy school, and I guess there was a whole host of reasons for why I didn't enjoy school. But I think in this day and age, school is so exciting, it's so full of adventure, it is so full of wonderment that our children really and truly do look forward to going to school. And I have with me in studio today Siraj Ghoor. He's going to talk to us about private schooling, I guess the pros and cons, and he's probably going to correct me and say to me, there are no cons as far as private schooling is concerned, but it is, of course, that time of year where you need to decide as a parent how you're going to go forward with your child's schooling year, whether it's primary, pre-primary, or even high school, and how important it is that you make the correct and the right decisions regarding your child's schooling, because it really means it's about preparing your child for his or her future going ahead. Siraj Ghoor, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much for having me here.
I'm pleased to have you in studio, and of course I'm kind of wondering, when I did my introduction, you as principal of Open Linds Campus for self-directed learners felt about what I said about schooling, the school year in the new year, and also this time of year, September, where parents have to apply their minds to how they go forward with their children's schooling. Why is that important?
Well, obviously the choice that we make for our children has a huge impact on them. And where I come from, yes, I do have a private school, but it is not a private mainstream school. So it is not a Saint something or aligned to some kind of school like that. So it is very much a school where students are self-driven. Well, we actually motivate them to become self-driven and to teach themselves and to learn to assess themselves and to eventually put themselves through matric. It is obviously easier when we get the students young, age 6, 7, because then there is still a love for learning. And then we keep that interest in learning going, and we tap into it so that the students can actually, yes, also do the maths, do the languages, excuse me, but also to pursue interests which they might have. And that makes our life easier is when we get them young. When they're a bit older, it is not too late. And then we have to reframe their thinking and reframe the way they see school. Because in the school system, they are often forced to do the learning. You know, they have external motivations for learning, whether it's through rewards or punishment. And we want to build the internal love for learning and the internal goal setting so that they can achieve their goals.
Alhamdulillah, and I like what you say about the love for learning. And I did make a comment in my introduction, and I said that I used to be so miserable when I was reminded after the school holidays, very especially the December holidays, because it's a long break. I used to hate the thought of going back to school, and simply because of the system back then. I guess lots have changed even in state schools in this day and age, but I guess the number one prize for children would be to enter a private school environment, because in that environment is where they teach critical thinking. And I want you to explore with me today the importance of critical thinking and how we inculcate that into our children. But before we get there, let's understand, who is Siraj Ghoor? Do you come from an educational background, and why are you so passionate about open minds learning, and of course this whole issue or this whole thinking around self-driven learning? And as I sit here with you, it seems as if it's a huge task. Will the kids really rise up to that?
Well, a bit of my background, I was at WITS and I did a BCom degree and majoring in information systems. However, I'd never worked in the IT field. I joined the family business back in Mafikeng, and it was in that town that I began to homeschool my kids. However, before that, I was involved in a Muslim school. So I suppose education is very much my interest. And then with the homeschooling, I really...
So let's understand why you as parents, you together with your wife, Rubina, decided that you want to homeschool your children. And I know there's a lot of, I wouldn't say controversy, but there are discussions around homeschooling, very especially recently. I know the Department of Education has been talking about changes to the whole homeschooling system, and people are up in arms about that. Homeschoolers feel, or the people that run those schools are beginning to feel, that there's going to be unnecessary or undue pressure on them. So right at the beginning with you and Rubina, why did you decide to go that route?
So what happened is that we found that we were moving my eldest son from school to school.
Why?
We were just not happy with the school which my child was at, whether it was a preschool, whether it was grade 1, and so on. I suppose we were perhaps fussy, I would use that word, in terms of what we want for our children. And then we eventually began a Muslim school with the community.
In Mafikeng?
In Mafikeng. And we still weren't happy with being in the system. And then while we were at the Muslim school, we were consulting with Brother Idris Kamisa. And he gave us a book written by 3 authors, one of whom was Hamza Yusuf. And that book spoke about homeschooling. And that made us start this journey with homeschooling. And just giving my child the freedom to learn in his own way, and to also set his goals, to self-assess, to speed up or slow down as he wanted, and also to pursue his interests, and to pursue other skills, like entrepreneurship skills, for example. That convinced me that this is the way to go, that we need to relook at the whole system and to change the way we do things.
As you speak, I kind of wonder about the discipline and the energy that parents require to homeschool their children, because the kids could manipulate you, could they not? So you have to be very firm.
I agree that the kids can manipulate you, but I don't think that's the right word to use, maybe. I would say that they have more space to assert how they want to do it. Instead of using the word manipulate, let's say that they might have other interests, or they might not like all the subjects which they are doing. And in terms of being firm, there has to be a balance, because one has to give a child leeway to actually pursue their interests and to motivate them and to encourage them. And sometimes one has to let go entirely and let the child lead the way. And that's when we see miracles happen.
Wow. I worry a little bit about that, but you are obviously the specialist in this field, so you know what you're talking about. I kind of worry, what about those parents that don't have enough of authority, perhaps? And if they kind of let go, the child will probably end up running rings around the parents. We're talking specifically homeschooling, but we will get to Open Minds learning in a short while, which is really totally different to a homeschooling environment. So let's talk about discipline and the firmness of the parents.
If I were to advise homeschool parents, I would say be firm on the or be much firmer on the non-education aspects of life, where doing their chores, making sure that whatever they do around the house is seen to. They have to do that. And many homeschoolers feel that firmness around making sure that the non-school stuff gets done helps them with the discipline of education. At the same time, we need to remember that when our kids, or from the time our kids are born, and as they are toddlers, they have a real love for learning. They really want to learn. They want to learn how to talk. They want to learn how to sit and crawl and walk without any encouragement or any kind of punishment if they don't do that. And they have a natural love for learning. Humans have that from birth. And we need to not interfere with the process of learning. And that's what I feel that mainstream schools do, is that mainstream schools interfere with the learning process, as each child is unique and they all learn at their own pace and they have their own personal milestones. And some kids learn to read at the age of 3 or 4. Some kids learn to read when they are age 8 or 9. And it's perfectly okay, because even those late readers do catch up. And we need to stop boxing kids and labeling them for something they can't do, for example.
Okay, let's go for a first ad break. I'm speaking with Siraj Ghoor. He started out with a homeschool. He's the principal of Open Minds Campus for self-directed learners. Fascinating stuff that I'm picking up with Siraj in the show this morning, and I do hope that you're going to learn much during this discussion. First ad break, please don't go away. Welcome back. My guest is Siraj Ghoor. He's the principal of the Open Minds Campus, and we're here to talk about education. And if you're wondering why we're talking education at this time of year, well, to give you a sense of whether you believe your children are in the right environment, or if you're not working, if you're a stay-at-home mom or dad, perhaps you should then seriously think about homeschooling your children, or possibly change their schooling so that you can get the best outcomes, not only for your child right now, but going forward into his future as well. Siraj, you spoke about changing your son. You changed his schools a couple of times in his primary years. I'm kind of wondering about moving kids regularly from one environment to another. Adaptability, self-esteem issues, do they all feel or ask themselves the question, I must be stupid, why is it that my parents are moving me around so much? And do we need to have those deep conversations with them to make them understand, we think this is not working for you, and it ain't working for us either, so we need to explore other opportunities?
Okay, so my son began school at the age of 3. So he spent 3 years in preschool, and he went to 2 schools at the time. And then he went to school, mainstream school, until grade 3. And again, he went to 2 schools. He adjusted well to the first 3 schools. Well, the first school and the third school were the same school, actually. Okay. Because preschool was grade 1. And he was quite happy at those few schools. He was very unhappy at the last school he went to. He spent the last 2 years there. And that's when we decided to actually start homeschooling. And we ask our kids every year if they want to go back to mainstream school or if they want to continue homeschooling. And mostly they chose to homeschool. At some points they chose to go to a school for a short period of time. But however, we did let them also have a say in how they want to finish their schooling career.
Did your son ever express why he was unhappy at the last school he was at? And then also you indicated that at some point they wanted to go back into mainstream. What was the reasoning for that? So 2 questions.
Okay. So my son was unhappy at the last school he was at, largely because of, the one issue was the teacher. And the other issue was it was a very small class, and I don't think he was quite enjoying the company whom he was with.
And that's very important, is it not? Because their school life is not only about learning, it's also about socializing. And that plays a huge role. If they're not happy with the people they're socializing, they're definitely not going to perform well.
And then at some point, one of my sons went to school for a term and came back. I think wanted to experience the other side. Okay. So I think they are curious, and perhaps they want to pace themselves according to their peers and see where they are at.
And you didn't mind that he decided to go back to mainstream school for a while. Did you encourage him for that one term to follow his dreams, so to speak? How old was he at the time, by the way?
This was one of my other sons. He was 10 years old.
Okay.
He went to grade 5. And I actually encouraged him to actually go and try it out. And for me, it was just a wonderful learning opportunity to see how he copes and to see how long he would last.
Okay. I think the other issue with a lot of parents is teaching your children how to live in a very competitive environment. And here's where state schools and other private schools come into the picture, because they do encourage sport in a very, very big way. And with sport, we know there's huge encouragement on competition. How do you view that? And, do you not believe that a homeschool environment then disadvantages the child?
So in terms of competition, there's a sports competition and there's academic competition. I actually don't think it's very healthy to compete for top of the class or to try and rank yourself above your peers. I think it does hurt a lot of students' self-esteem, because some students, no matter how hard they try, they can never get to be top of the class. And they still have so many other valuable life skills which they can hone and which will make them succeed in life. And I think the students must learn to cooperate more than to compete. And I think we should be encouraging our students to help each other rather than hide certain aspects of their work from each other, because I don't think that is very healthy. And we don't need to be always competing with each other in the world. We need to learn to cooperate and to help each other. And I feel that in many ways schools fail us because we don't want to necessarily live in a dog-eat-dog world. We want to live in a world where we build each other up. Sports is by nature competitive. That's something which kids strive for. They want to win the games. We can teach them sportsmanship in terms of, yes, you can win graciously, and how to lose and still pick yourself up and try again. Same with academics. If you don't succeed in doing a certain science problem, you can try again. It's not the end of the world if you didn't get it the first time around. So from my perspective and my school, I don't believe in rankings, because each child is on their own unique journey.
In a sense, competition is and can also be healthy. You do need to instill a bit of a sense of competition in your children because it's a bad world out there. And if they don't understand the principles of competition, they ain't going to make it, are they? So how do you instill that pride and competition, or the sense of competitiveness in the child without them pulling other children down?
I think a good way to do it is to compete against yourself, to try and be better every day, to try and, because I think it's a hadith that if you are not better than the day before, and then you are a loser. So yes, it's important to get better. It's important to do things better. It's important to always try and improve on your own terms for yourself, not to be comparing yourself to others, but to be comparing yourself to yourself.
Absolutely. How do you instill that value in the children? Because in a homeschool environment, I guess this should be done at state schools as well and other private schools. How do you instill that value in them without them confusing it with fierce competition?
We need to build in them a growth mindset. So the words,
which is?
So the words they use, what they tell themselves, what do we model as parents? Do we say, for example, at school I used to hate maths and I can't do maths? Do we say such things to our kids? And also,
what should we be saying instead? Because that's what I used to say all the time in my school days.
You could say that, you know what, let me do the maths with you. Let me see if I can learn along with you. And let me see if I can overcome my trauma in maths.
Wow.
And maybe I can succeed. That's one example which I can do as a parent.
Okay, let's go for our next ad break. You can see and hear that he is a great teacher and also principal of an amazing school called Open Linds Campus for self-directed learners. And this has been running since the year 2015, almost 10 years in the running, and truly a deep thinker regarding issues around not only competition, of course, but learning as well. Opening the minds of our children to embrace learning and for them to understand and realize that that's going to hold them in great stead when they go out into the rat race. Still more to come on the show. Please do stay with us. This is Perspective with me, Julie Ali. My guest today is Siraj Ghoor. We're talking education, but also hoping that you're going to apply your mind to your child's future by way of the school that he or she attends. And if you have any doubts, then I guess this is the right time for you to do all of your research and make sure that, inshallah, your child is placed in a school that fits him. Fits him and fits all of his academic and possibly also sporting needs. We continue our discussion with Siraj Ghoor, who is the principal of Open Linds Campus for self-directed learners. And that leads me to a very, very important question, and that is worrisome for a lot of parents. What about children with learning difficulties? And I think we can spot those children from the time they're toddlers, because they're generally difficult with everything in their lives. They're always complaining, they're always unhappy, and moms and dads both have their hands full with those children. What are your thoughts around children that express all of these difficulties? Do you have them assessed by possibly, before they go to school, an occupational therapist, educational psychologist, etc., and then try and understand what problem the child is presenting with, try and address it, and then also when you get him or her into the right schooling environment, speak to the teachers and the principal to say, this is what my child is having challenges with. And then how would you, as a principal, try and adapt the lessons to that child, or try and support the child through a very pleasant academic experience?
This is actually an extremely lengthy topic, and I don't think we have enough time to cover it in detail.
Well, then I think we must leave it for another interview, inshallah. But
Possibly.
if you just want to just give me an overview.
So I must first qualify that I am not qualified in remedial education. So I'm not an expert in that by any means. Neither is Open Linds Campus necessarily geared towards remedial students. But what comes to mind is, I think there are many aspects to what makes a child remedial. I think there could be emotional aspects, emotional trauma. I think there could be maybe false expectations in grade 1, grade 2. Sometimes kids are just late readers. They just cannot think abstractly enough to be able to decipher letters when they are age 6 or 7, and they might need more time. And that might cause them to be labeled remedial as being behind or backward. Because there have been students who I've seen who learn to read at age 8 or 9. And
is that okay with you?
Yes, and I've seen this child actually eventually doing medicine.
Wow.
Okay, so it's not a case about there must be an early reader to be able to be succeeding in life, you know. And some kids are learning to be reading at age 4, and that's also fine.
My initial question regarding your response is the difficult child. You know, not all kids are the same. You could have 3 children or 2 children, and the first one might be very well adapted, well adjusted, very happy with life itself. Doesn't matter, you know, how young he is, but just embracing life fully. And the other child that I described just now as just being downright difficult. With that, and I know you're going to say to me, you're not an expert in that field, but I'm just kind of thinking ADHD and ADD and all of that kind of stuff that's being bandied about all the time.
I'm not against students being assessed. There are many students who have been assessed, and I leave that to the experts. I'm just questioning the labeling to an extent. You know, I don't know how much is true ADHD or how much might be delayed learning, where they weren't, where they just weren't ready, and I'm not sure how much of a child's confidence has been broken when they're not able to read when they are in grade 1, or they're unable to do maths when they're in grade 1, and how much they might lack in confidence. And I'm not sure if that will translate into a remedial child.
And sadly, very, very sadly, those poor children then go through, let's assume in a state school, because those classes are pretty big, and they start comparing themselves with other children. And very sadly also, little children can be very cruel in their innocence and then pick on that child, that late learner, and just demolish his confidence and self-esteem even more.
Absolutely. And that's my concern. Having said so, I'm again saying that there is room for students who are remedial. And let's not say no, all students who are remedial have been damaged or have issues emotionally. It has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And you're speaking about a difficult child. For me, is follow that child. See what they want to do, see what they are good at, and focus on that. And you never know, perhaps the academics might come right. You just don't know.
So when you say follow the child, is that figuratively or?
Literally.
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 And figuratively, I should imagine.
I would say that we should see, give the child time sometimes to be able to learn the abstract skills, to be able to progress in school. There is a problem, for example, in many state schools in grade 8, where many students cannot think abstractly enough to do algebra. So I would say build the thinking skills, give a child problems to solve, and let them think through it. And that will help them to think more abstractly and then to do algebra. But let's not say that this child can't do maths and you must do maths lit. Sometimes a child just needs a bit of time and just needs to think a bit more abstractly so that they can do the maths if they want to for the matric.
When you use the word abstract, are you talking about critical thinking? And let's look at the issue of critical thinking. How do we introduce that pre the child even going to school, so that when they get to the school starting age, they're able to apply their minds, they can be critical thinkers, which is really going to take them to places throughout life?
So in terms of abstract thinking, I just spoke about algebra now, and that's a good example. For many students, the concept of a x or a y is very abstract for them to do maths with. And that's what I mean in terms of, can they think in terms of variables for, say, algebra. For a child in grade 1, perhaps the shape of the number 3 doesn't mean 3 items. So the child has to bridge that gap. And to be able to think critically, I would say very important to make the child solve problems, solve his, her own problems, and also make them independent. Make them independent learners, whether they're at homeschooling or whether they're at school. Let's not baby them or spoon feed them through the process.
Let's also look at the issue. We talked about abstract learning, critical thinking, and we do know now that there's a huge push with government schools regarding STEM, the STEM subjects. How do you, in your environment, introduce that? And if you see a child having difficulty grasping these concepts, do we go back to exactly what we've said about critical thinking, abstract, or what other mechanisms are in place to help the child start, creating a love for those subjects, because those are very important subjects?
Yes, it's important for them to have the confidence and to love those subjects. And the way we introduce them is very important. So sometimes they have gaps from the earlier years, specifically in say, mathematics, and we need to help them fill those gaps. And also to allow them to think through the STEM content, the science and the maths and the chemistry, and let them learn to solve the problems on their own. And sometimes they can do it earlier, and sometimes they need more time to be able to master those concepts.
Okay, I'm kind of also wondering about, I heard someone telling me at some point that if you do teach the kids chess at an early age, it's going to teach them to become very analytical. But let's go for our next ad break. We'll cover that as soon as we get back. This is Perspective with me, Julie Ali. We're talking education with the principal of a school based in Midrand, I think, or Kailami. It's called the Open Linds Concept. Welcome back to the final segment of the show this morning, and there just isn't enough time to cover absolutely everything that we would like to cover on the show. But anyway, I do hope and pray, inshallah, that we've given you a broad enough overview for you to make an informed decision about your children's future schooling with Principal Siraj Ghoor. He is of the Open Linds Campus for Self-Directed Learning. So back to you and the question that I stopped at regarding chess. If you're not a chess player yourself, I'm sure there are clubs that you get your kids involved in. Let's understand the importance of chess and analytical thinking.
I agree with you. I think a game like chess or any other game which does encourage strategic thinking and analytical thinking will help the student at school. It will help them think better, and it will help them to be able to cope better with the higher order thinking skills required in schools, whether it's languages, whether it's mathematics, science, even history, for example. So even, online thinking games also help students.
Just by the way, I never mastered chess. I've tried my hand at it, but it just went way above my head. I'm not quite sure what that says about me, but never mind.
No, some people just don't like chess, but they like other thinking games or other thinking activities.
Right.
So don't beat yourself up about that.
Fascinated by this game of chess, but could just not get my mind around it. But be that as it may, let's talk about Open Minds learning. Why did you and Rubina decide to go this route? You're almost 10 years in the running. Talk to us about the children, the schooling. What is it that you're offering that is different, possibly from homeschooling and public schooling? I should imagine you're almost in the middle of those two, or even beyond.
Well, I would say I am quite different to public schooling. There's a very interesting band of homeschoolers called unschoolers who don't believe in any curriculum, and they follow the child's interest from A to Z. They will not impose any kind of syllabus, or you have to learn to read, and so on and so on.
So then, how does that child, when he or she's finished their matric year, manage to get into university or college?
So that's the one, shall I say, maybe extreme of homeschooling. I think a lot of those students end up in the creative arts and the humanities. And then on the other extreme, you have the mainstream schools and homeschoolers who follow a formal school curriculum. And we at Open Linds Campus are somewhere in between.
Okay.
So we have a school syllabus, we have a journey for the child. However, we let the child do it at their own pace. And yes, but there has to be a pace. We do want them to, or we do motivate them to actually focus on the core subjects, maths, languages, and science. Because with those core subjects, you can do anything you want to. If you've got maths and languages, you could do science, you could do physics, chemistry, you could do history, biology, because history might be content-based, which is language-based, whereas chemistry and physics might be more maths-based. So we focus on the core skills, and then we don't have regular exams and tests. So we do assess the children to see how much they know.
How do you do that? Because in my mind, an exam is similar to an assessment.
So it's assessment to see whether they've covered the work and whether they're able to do it on their own. So if they've covered a topic, say they are adding fractions, so are they able to find the lowest common denominator, and add fractions, for example, and then we know, yes, they can do it. And then we assess them again after a few months to make sure they have retained that knowledge. But we also teach them how to mark their own work, how to self-assess and self-correct. So we don't want to be the only judge of the child's work. We want them to also see for themselves how much they know.
Now I'm thinking, as you say that, you're actually also inculcating something very valuable in the child, and that is honesty. Because you have to be honest about assessing your own work, where you're at. Otherwise, you're cheating yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some students go through a cheating phase, and then they realize that they were just cheating themselves, and then they just go back to where they were, and then they start again from there. And that's an important life lesson which they can learn from. And then, yes, so I also import books which we use at our school, textbooks. So, like, for example, Singapore Maths. So they progress through those books. And once they've mastered a book, and then they move on to the next book. And that's how they move through the grades without being called that they're in grade 1 or grade 2. Because they could be in different levels for different subjects. And then at the same time, when they get to around age 14, 15, or sometimes younger, and then they need to then choose subjects, and we use Cambridge as an exit exam for matric. Purely, Cambridge I chose basically because Cambridge doesn't want to know about your past, whether you've passed grade 8 or grade 9 or grade 10. You just go and write the exam. There's no year mark. So there's only an exam mark. like it was way back when we were at school. So it is a much simpler way to get a matric. And obviously Cambridge is recognized by universities because it's been in the country for so many years. And the students and then they can finish school if they want to.
Siraj, let me ask you this question. You started your school in the year 2015. So have you seen your first, or is this going to be next year? Or is it still in 2 years' time? Are you going to see your first graduates out of your matric year?
Okay, so we have had older students starting from day one. So many students come to us from mainstream schools.
Okay.
All
So
right.
they might have been in standard 5 in the mainstream school and then they join you. How do you cope with all of that? Do you have separate classrooms? Because I'm thinking if you've got the little ones, the 6, 7-year-olds, together with the older students, is it not going to interrupt their learning?
So we actually have a classroom set up much like Montessori,
Okay.
where we group the ages together. So we have 3 classes. The first age group being from age 7 to 11, about. The next one, say 12 to 14. And
So
the highest.
you have from age 7 to 11 in one class. How do you then direct the learning? Because there's quite a gap.
Yes, so the learning is very much individual. Yes, there are students who do work together, but they work at their own pace, and we support them. And we also have some subjects we do together, whether it's history or geography or life skills, or So, and again, each class is unique and it changes all the time. So what might work this year won't work next year, depending on the spread of the ages, where the kids are at, how many students are doing similar work, how many are not doing similar work. But because it is personal, individual, and they learn how to self-teach, we can actually spread the age or put the ages together.
Sounds like a lot of workload on your part, you, the principal, and your teachers, obviously. Let's look at the pros and cons, or rather the advantages and possible challenges in running a school like that. And I know that they're probably very small classes, so the children do get almost individual attention, and that is a huge plus. But what are the other challenges that you find in an environment like yours?
Okay. I just want to add that they don't teach as such. We facilitate learning. So it's not like the teacher has to teach every subject to every single child. Yes, we support them, and also...
So how do you facilitate that? So if I'm now ready for a lesson, how do you... a lesson in history, perhaps, or reading, how do you facilitate that?
So it is very much a child starts on a topic, all right? We might introduce it, or the child might do a self introduction, and they use various resources, whether they use a textbook, whether they use a YouTube video, and that's how they would actually learn the content on their own. And when they get stuck, we do support them, and then we also make sure that they have actually mastered it by doing exam-style questions eventually for the subject. But at the same time, it is much easier because we're not setting tests every 2 weeks. We're not marking tests. We're not marking, 25 essays per class, So in that sense, it is easier. However, it is more challenging because we're doing all the subjects.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we need to, and even if we don't know something, we can learn with the student. And that also builds their confidence.
Have you noticed a very positive change in the children at your school because of the self-directed learning? What are you seeing them expressing to give you the confidence to know that you guys are in fact doing the right thing?
We see a lot of students grow in confidence. We see them being much more expressive, and also we see them learning how to self-teach and gaining in that self-confidence. We also see a child who is much more independent, and they become much more responsible because they know that they're not being forced into this. Yes, there is encouragement and motivation, But in the end, they are responsible for their work.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes to go before we wrap up. So very quickly, the all-important questions. Obviously, you don't, because of the size of the school, you're unable to offer them sport. And going forward, what is the biggest learning, not only for the children at your school, but for you and your wife and the teachers at the school?
So in terms of sport, we do have a sports class, we have a drama class. We do sometimes arrange matches against other schools. And there's even after-school sports activities which are done by outside groups. Okay, and your last question was?
The learning for you, your wife, and the teachers at the school. This is a journey not for the children only, it's a journey that you're going through with them.
For me, the learning has been learning about myself and how am I towards my students, towards my team, and towards my parents. Understanding my students, understanding where they are at, what their needs are, and to always do things better.
So clearly lots of self-reflection, alhamdulillah, and lots of improvements. So wonderful talking with you, Siraj. I do hope that we can have future conversations.
Inshallah.
All the very best. For people who would like to sign up their children at your school for the new academic year, how do they go about contacting you? Are you on the socials?
Yes, we are on Facebook, Instagram, and our website is openlindscampus.co.za.
Thank you for being with us. I've learned so much just by talking with you on the show this morning. And I'm sure you have too, and I'm sure you're going to have some deep thinking regarding the schooling of your children going forward. Hope you've enjoyed the discussion as much as I've enjoyed having our guest with us this morning, Siraj Ghoor, Principal of the Open Linds Campus for Self-Directed Learners. Thank you for being with me. Till next week at the same time, as always, Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.